Is weird, odd, strange, or just plain bizarre is really your cup of tea? Then the Golden State Media Concepts Weird News Podcast will give you that fix. Can't believe it? Well, listen for yourself as we deliver the strangest news you definitely won't find on CNN or Fox. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Weird News Podcast.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the GSMC Weird News Podcast. I am your host, Mitchell, the madman, the weirdo, the crazy guy. We are brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Check us out on our social media platforms as well, Instagram and Twitter. And send some comments, send us some love. Come check us out. We're on, I think, the majority of podcasting streaming services. So check us out. Look for GSMC Weird News. Also, you can get other awesome things, GSMC Sports and GSMC romance, religion, politics, all kinds of great, awesome, cool stuff like that. So check us out. Show us some love. We'd love to hear from you as well. Today, I have a weird episode, pun intended, right? We're going to be talking about weird machinery, weird technology, weird robots, right? We're going to go into just talking about Skynet from Terminator, kind of like that, some stuff like that. I've my first segment here is going to be very interesting. It's like robots mixed with living organisms. We'll get into that in just a second. But before we do, how have you been doing? If you listen to this right now, what's been going on? Think about your day. Think about how your week has been happening and what's going to happen for the rest of the week. And do you have any awesome plans? Anything cool going on? In my neck of the woods, I have a lot of work stuff. I work on a lot of creative projects myself personally. I'm doing so many things. This is actually one of two podcasts that I do. And then I also work in sales, and I get around a lot. I do a lot of traveling. So what's your life like? What are you getting into? What's weird about it, right? Talk about that stuff. That would be interesting. But getting right into our first segment, the first thing I'm going to cover is technology and robotics meets biology. Xenobots. You ever heard of that? Xenobot. Xenobot. So a xenobot is basically, it's named after some kind of African like frog. I guess it's like a xenofrog or something. I don't really know much about the frog itself, but so it's like a synthetic organism that I guess was created in a laboratory, and it's automatically designed by a computer. Like a computer designs this organism, and it performs desired functions, and it's combined with other biological tissues from living things, living like organisms and stuff. It's a very crazy and wild thing. Can you imagine? Like it's some kind of like Terminator thing, right? Like what is it I think it was maybe the second Terminator movie, Terminator 2 Judgment Day, which is one of the greatest. First of all, it's one of the greatest sci-fi movies of all time. It's also one of the greatest sequels of all time. It's Arnold Schwarzenegger's best movie. It's just, it is perfect. Not perfect, but it's an exquisite movie. Definitely check that out. But anyways, in the movie, the Terminator was talking about, somebody called him a robot or something like that. And he was like, I'm cybernetic organism or something like that. So cybernetic organism. How about that? So these xenobots are almost kind of like that, I guess. Maybe not so much, but somewhere along those lines. Well, we're going to get into some information about it, and you can find out for yourself about what you think of it and how it compares and contrasts to the old Terminators. So this is an article that I picked up from www.inverse.com, and it talks about the concepts of these xenobots. So here's the opening title. Self-healing xenobots mean a future with living organisms. With living machines. Biological machines redefine what scientists consider life. 100 years ago, it was easy to tell when something was a machine. Machines were hard and clanky, metallic and pretty heavy. As developmental biologist Michael Levin tells in verse. But lately it's become clear to Levin and his collaborator Joshua Bongard, a professor of computer science at the University of Vermont, that our definitions of machine and living organism are about to get really, really murky. In January of 2020, the two first made headlines after announcing their team had successfully created completely biological machines. I feel like I remember hearing about this at some point. Like it was something that was on the news or something like that, maybe. Did you remember hearing about that? I mean, it was a big deal. It was all over the place. You'd probably hear about it even if you didn't want to. Now Levin and Bongard have taken their biological machines, or xenobots as they're called, to the next level, using frog cells to create life forms capable of motion, memory, and manipulation of the world around them. These incredible results were published Wednesday in the journal Science of Robotics. The background. The 2020 biological machines were designed in computer simulations, then built in petri dishes using microscalpels and living biological tissues. Oh, that is insane. They were made in petri dishes. That's how small they were. Skin and muscle cells harvested from embryos of the African clawed frog Xenophos laevis. In other words, they're designed like one would design a robot, but the raw materials are 100% living cells. Also, if you go to the site to check out this article, there is a video here that shows the petri dish and them combining the living tissues with, I guess, these micro cells for the robots, these micro machines. Micro machines, isn't that like I feel like that's like a toy or something. Levin and Bongard landed on a design reminiscent of the dog-turned-ottoman from Beauty and the Beast that, once carved into shape, would actually contract its muscle cells and walk across the dish. They called their living creation xenobots, pronounced xenobot, after the frog that donated its cells. Oh, that is insane. Can you imagine seeing that? Like looking through a microscope and seeing the thing that looked like the dog ottoman from Beauty and the Beast running around on a petri dish? That would freak me out, man. I would be freaked. Super freaked. It's like some crazy Dr. Frankenstein stuff. Already in the first paper, we showed some creatures whose evolutionary history took place in a computer. Levin, a professor at Tufts University, says they had an evolutionary history. It just wasn't on Earth. It was in this completely virtual world that Josh Bongard coded up. A few weeks ago, Bongard published his new theory on whether it's helpful to still use the metaphor that living things are like machines. Spoiler, it's not. In the team's latest bot advance, there's no sculpting needed. The new xenobots aren't ottomans. They're spheres, and they don't have muscle cells. They're all skin, but they still move around just fine. What's new, the skin of a Xenophos frog is covered in cilia, tiny hair-like structures which redistribute mucus across their skin. It's an adaptation to keep bacteria and fungi at bay. When you put embryonic skin cells together, they conglomerate into little spheres with the cilia on the outside. The team found that the cilia on the new xenobot worked in concert, so the thing can go forward, Levin says. They start to row, and then things move. And I'm sitting here looking at a picture of this. It looks like, it's hard to explain what this looks like. Just a bunch of cells coming together that have lights on them. And that's crazy. The researchers also tested to see if they could see the xenobots up with a form of rudimentary memory. They injected them with RNA that encodes a protein that changes colors when it's exposed to a certain color of light. It worked. The bots made the proteins, and it was clear which bots had seen the light when they came back a different color. That's crazy. It's like a micro-organic machines, right? That like it's kind of like AI almost, right? That's what it kind of sounds like here to me. That they're moving and functioning themselves, like they're aware of being alive. Maybe, I don't know. It's a proof of principle that we can modify the cells to put in other things that give them new functionality, says Levin. Synthetic biology nowadays is all cell soups. It's all cells and culture. Now they can be embodied. We have a body into which, now that I'm messing this up, I apologize. Now they can be embodied. We have a body into which we can put all of these kind of circuits. The team was also interested in how the Xenobots would act as a group. Bongard ran more computational simulations to try and predict what would happen when you let the bots into an arena with a bunch of particles. How would the bots' motion redistribute the particles? Can you get them to make them into piles? It was an iterative. I'm losing my train of thought here. Like I can't read all of a sudden. I'm sorry. It was an iterative process. I'm like, this is so crazy. I usually have no problems reading whatsoever. Measuring properties of the Xenobots, putting the data into the computer simulation to make predictions, then testing those predictions on the bots and measuring again. It goes simulation, experiment, and hopefully each time we're a bit smarter after each go-around, Levin says. Why this matters. Practically speaking, Xenobots could have applications like swimming through the bloodstream and unclogging arteries, but Levin is more excited about the big picture. Most of the problems of modern medicine would go away if we understood how to make cells build whatever we want them to build. When Xenobots grow over their short 10-day lifespan, they elongate and become transparent. They almost look like ghosts, Levin says, and it's nothing you would have predicted. They don't look like frog embryos. They don't look like tadpoles. They have their own brand new developmental sequence. It's a whole new type of model organism, Levin explains. That will help us understand how cells build structures and how we can motivate them to make different things besides their genetic default. No genetic engineering required. Most of the problems of modern medicine would go away if we understood how to make cells build whatever we want them to build, he says. When probed about whether it was just an accident that this configuration of ciliated cells can move, Levin pushed back at the question. He says a lot of people don't take evolution seriously enough. Our own complex cognitive properties evolved from humbler, simpler versions of those exact same properties in other, earlier organisms, he says. Are the Xenobots using physics to repurpose their mechanisms in a way that is explainable by chemistry and physics? Of course they are. There's no magic, but it's the same for us. When we all walk around, we're using the electricity of electrical networks in our brains to activate our muscles. That doesn't mean it's any less wondrous. People are very binary in things. They say, is it a robot or is it an organism? Yes and yes, says Levin. These binary classifications are just no good anymore. What's next? Levin and his team are moving forward with their experiments, including some using cells from sources beyond frogs. He's driven by his curiosity about how groups of cells work together to form a sort of collective intelligence, just like our human brains. That's a problem that's kept me awake since I was a kid, he says. How does the structure of the body relate to the mind that lives in there somehow? As these living bots get more and more complex, society will have to grapple with what it means to be cognitive. Levin imagines a future straight out of a science fiction movie, one that will challenge how we view cognition and what we ethically owe our creations. In your lifetime, we're going to be surrounded by just an incredible plethora of new agents that are weird hybrids and cyborgs and robots with living tissue embedded and vice versa. Every combination under the sun is going to be running around somewhere, says Levin. Abstract. Robot swarms have to date been constructed from artificial materials. Motile biological constructs have been created from muscle cells grown on precisely shaped scaffolds. However, the exploitation of emergent self-organization and functional plasticity into a self-directed living machine has remained a major challenge. We report here a method for generation of in vitro biological robots from frog cells. These xenobots exhibit coordinated locomotion via cilia present on their surface. These cilia arise through normal tissue patterning and do not require complicated construction methods or genomic editing, making production amenable to high thought-put projects. The biological robots arise by cellular self-organization and do not require scaffolds or microprinting. The amphibian cells are highly amenable to surgical, genetic, chemical, and optical stimulation during the self-assembly process. We show that the xenobots can navigate aqueous environments in diverse ways, heal after damage, and show emergent group behaviors. We constructed a computational model to predict useful collective behaviors that became elicited from a xenobot swarm. In addition, we provide proof of principle for a writable molecular memory using a photoconvertible protein that can record exposure to a specific wavelength of light. Together, these results introduce a platform that can be used to study many aspects of self-assembly, swarm behavior, synthetic bioengineering, as well as provide versatile, soft-body living machines for numerous practical applications in biomedicine and the environment. Holy bejeebus. That is insane. I can't even wrap my head around like the way people do these things. Can you? Can you wrap your head around how somebody in a lab, some science, some big bird brain can just sit there and combine living matter with artificial matter, and it coincides? That is insane. It's insane. Hey, here we go. It's the machines, man. They're going to take over. I mean, in the future, I guess we are as a species integrating into our own technology that we've created to ourselves to aid ourselves, right? But I feel like what they were saying, like if they could really kind of wrap their heads around these xenobots and get them functional. Functional in a way that they can be utilized in whatever way we see fit. Then imagine the possibilities, man. You could, like they were saying, you could help people with blood clots and just different issues. Like you could send these little organisms and these little bots in to like help people's bodies and stuff. Of course, there would be some skeptics and conspiracy theorists that would, say that it would, take you over, could kill you, or somebody could implant these things into you and control your body. I mean, here's the thing. Somebody could be like, oh, that's crazy. That's impossible. Well, I feel like at this point, nothing's impossible, especially with the advancement in technology and science. It's really crazy. Anyways, let me know what you thought about that. It's pretty mind-boggling, right? Xenobots, check them out. Look into it. It's an excellent thing to dive into. It, especially if you're a sci-fi nerd like I am. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to discuss another bit of technology, robots that eat dead bodies. Yeah. Come back and check us out. GSMC Weird News Podcast.
Are you tired of the same old news? Are you sick of the seemingly endless political spin and negativity? The GSMC America's Still Beautiful podcast is a weekly news podcast covering all the top positive and uplifting news stories. We cover stories that will inspire, uplift, and remind you of the good in the world. Tune into the Golden State Media Concepts America's Still Beautiful podcast to get all the great and positive news stories of today. Download the GSMC America's Still Beautiful podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Yo, yo, yo. What is up? What is up? Welcome back to the GSMC Weird News Podcast. I'm your host, Mitchell the Mad Weirdo, Madman, Crazy Guy. All kinds of crazy, weird adjectives to describe me as the host. Why do they let me host this? They must be crazy at the GSMC. I'm kidding. Much love, folks. Much love, you guys. Thanks for the opportunities. Let me do this for everybody. If you're just joining us, our last segment was very interesting. We were talking about Xenobots, not to be confused with, microbots or nanobots, not to be confused with nanobots. That was the other notion I think of, which are like micro robots. These are micro robots with living organisms attached to them or mixed with them. It's very interesting. They took DNA from these xenofrogs, and the amphibian DNA, it adapts and stuff like that. So it adapts, and they were finding a way to like fuse it together with these micro robots in a petri dish, no less. And it's some crazy stuff. It's wild. It's like out of a sci-fi movie. It's really crazy. But it's basically creating microscopic living tissue robots that can form and move and interact independently. It's wild. I definitely recommend you checking that out. The last segment, and then looking it up yourself. Xenobots, spelled Xenobots. It is wild, freaky wild. This segment, if you were listening from the last one, we're going to talk about robots that eat dead bodies for fuel and keep going. I think it's some kind of like a military project or something. It's funny because the name of these mechanical monsters are called Eater, I think, if I'm not mistaken. Let me check my notes. Yes, Eater. It sounds like some food service, like Uber Eats or DoorDash, Eater, Waiter, But no, but Eater is actually an acronym for energetically autonomous tactical robot. I'll read you this quick little insert that's off of Wikipedia. It says, the energetically autonomous tactical robot was a project by Robotic Technology, Inc. and Cyclone Power Technologies, Inc. to develop a robotic vehicle that could forage for plant biomass to fuel itself, theoretically operating indefinitely. So basically what it's saying is like this machine gets its power source, its ability to move and do things and work from organic matter. From this description, though, on Wikipedia, it says plant biomass. But from the things that I've heard and seen and read, there's ones that, in fact, I'm looking at a picture right now. If you look this up, it's like the first thing that comes up, but it shows a picture of a robot pulling in what looks like a body. I'm assuming that this is a fake dummy body, and this is like some kind of like trial test thing. I'm actually going to pull this picture up so I can look at it. Yeah, this is definitely a dummy made to look like a real person, or maybe it is a real person just doing that. I honestly don't know. It's freaky either way. But I'm going to go to an article. We're going to get a little bit deeper into the nitty gritty of what these Eater robots are exactly. I'm very intrigued, aren't you? A robot that eats dead bodies. I almost feel like I should have started with that one. That's probably more interesting than Xenobots, little living organism robots that move around and do things microscopically. This Eater robot thing might be even of a bigger deal. Oh, well, hey, it's cool. I do what I want here. I let my hair down. All right, so we're going to get into this article, and this is, what is the www.wired.com. Wired.com. Oh, here we go. This really delves into the Eater robot. Military researchers develop corpse-eating robots. I'm going to have to go back to Wikipedia and see what they were talking about with this plant biomass stuff, because this is... Anyways, here we go. From the file marks, evidently, many scientists have never seen even one scary sci-fi movie. The Defense Department is funding research into battlefield robots that power themselves by eating human corpses. You heard that right. What could possibly go wrong? Since they apparently don't own TVs or DVD players, researchers at Robotic Technology say the robots will collect organic matter from the file, marked evidently. Many scientists have never seen... Oh, wait. You know what? I was reading like a... this is so weird. Like, whoever wrote this is super crazy. Okay. They will collect organic matter, which could include human corpses to use for fuel. But if you picked up anything on flesh-eating robots over the years, you know you'll ignore that tasty soybean field and make a chow line right to the nearest dead body. And if the machines can't find enough dead people to eat, they can always make new ones. Ooh, it's creepy. Yeah, like, what if, like, you know, with the development of AI and all this stuff, these robots become self-aware and there is no dead bodies to eat, and they just start killing the soldiers around them and eating them for power to take over. I told you Skynet's coming. Do-do-do-do-do. That's the Terminator theme music for anybody that didn't know. I'll do it again. Do-do-do-do-do. Do-do-do-do-do. Somebody's probably rolling their eyes like, what is it? Is this guy reporting on news? He's doing some weird thing. Researchers seem to get a kick out of ensuring the demise of the human species. The person that wrote this is all about some fun sci-fi stuff. So the project is called the Energetically Autonomous Tactical Robot, or EATR. Wired.com readers looking to save time and trouble are invited to begin marinating themselves in a mix of 10W30 and Heinz 57 sauce immediately. Oh my gosh. It's so hilarious. I should have picked a better article. This one on Wired was kind of silly. It didn't really go into as much detail as I was hoping. But I want to read the actual Wikipedia of the EATR robot, because what I was reading earlier to you all was that it's eating plant mass is what it was saying. So let's dive in a little bit deeper. Here's the Wikipedia on it. The Energetically Autonomous Tactical Robot, EATR, EATR, was a project by Robotic Technology Incorporated and Cyclone Power Technology Incorporated to develop a robotic vehicle that could forage for plant biomass to fuel itself, theoretically operating indefinitely. It was a concept developed between 2003 and 2009 as part of the DARPA military projects for the United States military. I think I've heard a lot of, there's so many things, so many conspiracy theory things on DARPA. I won't get into any of them right now, but it's just, I've heard so many conspiracy things on DARPA and like these, you just look it up. There's a plethora of things to thumb through, but it's some of it's hilarious. As of 2015, EATR is no longer being developed. Oh, they stopped developing it. So, Now, are they just saying they stopped developing it? Or did they really stop developing it? What's going on here? Conspiracy theory. That's the Twilight theme, for anybody wondering. I'm just full of themes tonight, right? Full of themes. I did the Terminator theme music, and then I did the Twilight Zone. Twilight Zone, very good show. Check it out. The project elicited some internet and media rumors after news circulated that the robot would, or at least could, ingest human remains. Cyclone Power Technologies stated that animal or human biomass was not intended to be used in the waste heat combustion engine of the robot, and that sensors would be able to distinguish foraged materials, although the project overview from RTI listed other sources, including chicken fat. My question is like, okay, it's saying that they were denying that it could ingest human remains or whatever, or animal, and that it only does like foliage, plant stuff. But I mean, chicken fat is like meat. It's meat, right? It's meat. Sounds like somebody's trying to hide something. I'm mostly kidding, but seriously, I mean, obviously, it definitely could do that. It absolutely could do that. I mean, if you like look this up, you can see pictures. Like pictures will be pulled up where it shows like these robots pulling in human bodies. Now, I don't know if that's like fake or whatever. If it's not fake, then obviously there's something behind that. The robot was powered by a steam engine built by Cyclone Power Technologies company called the Cyclone Waste Heat Engine, which produced power through external combustion of biomass, i.e. combustion outside of the engine. An example of Rankine cycle energy. Engine. The engine would power the vehicle's movement as well as being used to recharge the batteries that run the sensors, arms, and ancillary devices. Fuel sources. The eater was programmed to consume certain types of vegetation as biomass to convert into fuel, and only those types of vegetation. Eater could also use other fuels such as gasoline, kerosene, cooking oil, or solar energy. The company also included chicken fat as one of its proposed fuel sources in the project overview. The system was quoted as delivering an expected 100 miles, which is 161 kilometers, of driving on 150 pounds of vegetation. This just seems like, I don't know, man. I feel like, Wikipedia is kind of like, bypassing a little bit of what it's, I want to read another article about this because I just don't feel satisfied with what Wikipedia. I mean, the Wired thing was really short and kind of silly, but I want to read. Let's see what else. What else do they have here? Ooh, I thought I saw a really good. Here we go. This is coming from Paleo. Let's see. What's this? Gizmodo. Gizmodo.com. It says, remember the Eater, the military robot that was supposed to eat humans? We completely understand the public's concern about futuristic robots feeding on human population, but that is not our mission, Cyclone CEO Harry Skulls said in a press release in 2009. They could make the CEO of an alternative energy company issue such an insane statement. Well, Cyclone had a contract with DARPA for a little guy named Eater, the energetically autonomous... Oh my gosh, sorry, my nose is itching. Tactical robot. And once news began to circulate about Eater, the public became concerned that this robot was powered by feasting on the flesh of dead people. Back in 2009, Cyclone Power Technologies was working with DARPA and Robotic Technology Inc. to develop a robot that didn't need a battery or a fuel tank of any kind. The goal was to build a military robot that could go on the endurance missions and feed on the vegetation around it without needing to be refueled or have a battery recharged by humans. Above, we see rendering of the Eaters on the battlefield of the future, roaming around autonomously with drones overhead. All Eater would need for power was the biomass it could find like dead trees. Oh, and did I mention it had a chainsaw for chopping up vegetation, of course? As soon as people heard about this robot, they started asking the obvious question. Since this is a robot for the military, could it feed on dead humans who are killed in battle? Reporters asked questions, blog posts were written, and Eater became, in the eyes of the public, the robot that was going to swallow humans whole, or if not whole, then chopped up with the chainsaw arm in the front. Cyclone, Robotic Technology Inc., and DARPA quickly went into damage control mode, despite the fact that they were never the ones claiming that Eater would ever feed on humans. We are focused on demonstrating that our engines can create usable green power from plentiful renewable plant matter. The commercial applications alone for the Earth-friendly energy solutions are enormous, Scholl said. And he was right. The plan was a solid one. It had tremendous commercial application that didn't involve eating humans at all. The company estimated that about 150 pounds of vegetation could provide sufficient energy for 100 miles of driving. But as far as we know, the plans were scrapped and Eater no longer is being developed. So, well, hold on. There's a little bit more here. Let me read this little bit. These ads everywhere. Today, people are worried about how advanced military robots have become. For example, a recent video showing the Atlas robot running in the woods generated concern online. Yet, since it's completely tethered for its power, this version of Atlas is not much more advanced than what we've seen plenty of times before. That's not a robot. That's not a robo-panic. Back in my day, we had real robo-panics. Wake me up when Atlas skips through the woods while munching on a human lollipop. Hilarious. Thank you for adding that funny little footnote in there. Here's the thing. It absolutely could eat human bodies for fuel. If it's doing that for vegetation, you can't sit there and tell me that there's no way that they weren't developed to be able to consume any kind of organic mass for energy. Also, another thing I wanted to argue is like, if we're like supposed to be more conscious about the environment and stuff, isn't it eating more vegetation and trees and stuff a bad thing? Because we need more trees and foliage to help create good pure oxygen for us to filter out the carbon dioxide and give us more oxygen and stuff like that, right? I'm really dumb. I'm just a regular dude, average Joe. I don't know what I'm talking about, but it's just something I'm personally curious about, right? Wouldn't that be a thing? Also, from a practical standpoint, morals aside, right? If this machine is on the battlefield in time of war and there's like people dying already, so it's kind of, and the machine is working for whatever military, wouldn't it make sense that it would eat these bodies? It's doing two things. It's still being able to operate and perform its mission whilst also cleaning the field of dead bodies. It's an interesting question, right? Very, 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 very interesting. What do you think about it? What do you think? Do you think it was? Were they just like making up stuff? Do you think they really developed it that it would eat like bodies or eat people for energy and all that, or was it just what they were saying? It was just going to eat plant matter. And then also, why did it get scrapped? So many people made such a big deal about it. Do you think there's a possibility that they scrapped it because people were making a big deal about it? And they're like, oh no, they're on to us. They know about our human-eating robot. I don't know. Let us know in your comments. Come and share. Tell us on our social media, on our podcast. Tell us what you think about that. What are your opinions? When we come back, we're going to go a little bit more lighthearted and go into the history of treadmills. Yes, that's right. The history of treadmills. It's a lot crazier than you'd think. Come back, GSMC, a weird news podcast.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? Welcome back to the GSMC Weird News Podcast. I'm your host, Mitchell the Madman. Mitchell the Crazy Guy. The man, the legend, the myth. Coming at you. We've had some interesting segments today. We are talking about robotics, machinery, technology. Loosely, right? Our first segment was about xenobots. Living organisms combined with robots on a microscopic level created in a petri dish. I mean, do I really need to explain any more than that? Check that out. The segment after that, the last segment we just came back from, was about the eater robot. That's capital E, capital A, capital T, capital R. Apparently it was a robot that was developed. It's like a military robot developed by DARPA and some other companies to do tasks, and it ate organic matter. Now, there's conflicting points about whether, not points, but conflicting information about whether it was eating like humans, like people, like dead bodies, is what was a big speculation. And then the other one was the more general consensus from Wikipedia and other articles was that it ate plant mass, bio plant mass. So, I mean, hey, whatever. Check that out. This segment is going to be a little bit more lighthearted. It's about treadmills, right? Who likes treadmills? Is anybody listening to this? Do you have a treadmill at home? If you do, what's on it right now? Are you one of those? Do you have a treadmill? Is there like a bunch of laundry on top of it and dust? When's the last time you used that thing? You better get on that and start exercising. Get healthy. Do some running. If not, sell it. Sell that bad boy. Get some money for it. Treadmills and the weird history of them. So I picked this article up from runnersworld.com. And obviously, I like doing like pretty weird, crazy off the top stuff that really intrigues my interests, as well as hopefully the audience listening in. But I usually, if I feel like it doesn't spark my interest, I'm not going to come across it. Even if I think it's something that a lot more people besides myself would like, it just, I have to be interested in it. Something that I'm like literally like got my eyes peeled upon. And treadmills, I'm going to tell you, they're not one of them. But when I saw this article and I saw these old time pictures from, I don't know, like 16th century maybe, I was completely like, whoa, this looks like a torture device. But these are supposed to be like, it looks like what is it? It looks like a windmill. This is the picture I'm looking at. Anyways, I saw it and I was like, the title stuck out to me. It said The Really Weird History of Treadmills. So I was like, wow, there's a weird history with it. Let's find out about it. All right. And so I'm going to get into here. This was written by someone named John Carroll on April the 19th of this year, actually. So this is a more new news piece. The Really Weird History of the Treadmill. With the recent extraordinary growth in treadmill sales, we thought it was time to take... Yeah, people trying to get healthy, boost their immune systems with COVID. Is that a correlation? I feel like there's a stat sheet somewhere that says it is. We thought it was time to take a look at the long and extremely unlikely history of the world's most popular and least popular and only indoor running machine. The Romans used a huge treadmill crane in the construction of some of their magnificent buildings. One day, while a group of centurions were arguing over the horsepower equivalent of the new Euro 400, the Visigoths snuck in and sacked the city. The Roman Empire fell soon afterwards. There is a lesson in there somewhere. The earliest known mention of the word treadmill, as we understand it, is from 1555 in Les Propitius by Nostradamus, in which he wrote, "Through industry and craft, a device for stationary motion shall come to pass. Treadmill shall be in its denomination. Thus the world will end in conflagration. See if it doesn't." In 1818, a kind of treadmill, or tread wheel, was introduced to English prisons as a form of punishment, as well as to grind corn and pump water. The use of the cumbersome machine was ended in 1902 because it was insufficiently tedious. This picture that they're showing here there's like these different little stalls, almost as if like a bathroom stall, and then it shows individuals walking on what look like stairs, but apparently the stairs are in motion and going in a circular motion, and then they're pressing against something. And that is what that is describing the information from just before. The prison punishment thing. Following his conviction for gross indecency, Oscar Wilde was forced to walk such a treadmill while serving part of his sentence in Pentonville prison. Laboring on the infernal device one afternoon, he was asked to sum up his situation with one of his customary witty observations. "I have often found myself out of step with society," he replied. "Little has changed. He was soon moved to another prison. George Eliot toyed with the idea of calling her third book The Treadmill on the Floss, but felt such a title might suggest the story moved at a fair old clip, which it does not. In the 19th century, horses on treadmills sometimes powered farm equipment, but the practice was discontinued because the animals refused to wipe down the machines after use. I got to tell you, these people that write these articles, I love them. All these little one-liners and these cute little jokes and these puns and play on words, it just does something to my heart. The earliest recreational treadmills were considered dangerous to others, so a serious-faced man had to stand several meters in front and wave a red flag to let others know one was being operated and that it might well slip its moorings and go barreling around the gym. Man, this thing looks wackadoo. Wow. So what it looks like, what I'm looking at, this is the thing that the horse was using for the farm use. It looks like a giant top on this like wooden like frame. And the horse is on the top part of the top and he's walking it, spinning this giant wooden top that sits inside of this like giant wooden frame. This is crazy. I wonder how long it would take to construct something like that, especially back then. During the Cold War, the USSR produced millions of cheap treadmills to keep the workers healthy. In 1962, Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev I'm sorry. I'm not the best at pronouncing stuff, people. So if you watch my show or listen to these shows that I do, I apologize. And if you're really good at words and things like that, I apologize. But this is me. Anyways, Nikita Khrushchev insisted the annual May Day parade be led by 1,000 elite soldiers running on 1,000 treadmills to display to the world the unparalleled fitness of the Soviet army. Afraid to tell their short-tempered leader the treadmills were stationary devices, the organizers did as they were asked, with the result that the 5-mile parade was backed up for hours in Moscow. Suburbs and an intercontinental ballistic missile was stolen from his trailer by some local rascals. It has been suggested that an infinite number of monkeys were placed on an infinite number of treadmills. They would eventually begin slinging excrement at each other. In the 1980s, the home treadmill became a status symbol among city traders as crucial to their sense of self as red braces, a copy of Phil Collins' Face Value, and a cocaine addiction. The record speed for treadmill running is 45 miles per hour, set by Kansas sprinter turned farmer Jake Quick Draw McGraw. That is I'm not making that up. I'm reading that. It says Jake Quick Draw McGraw. That is awesome. Sounds like a country music star. A milliseconds lapse in concentration led to a slip, and he shot feet first from the belt at an astonishing velocity. It's perhaps no coincidence that McGraw also holds the record for fastest self-powered crossing of the mercifully flat state of Kansas in a prone position. The first zero-gravity treadmill was a failure, as it simply floated away. In 1995, an off-road treadmill was designed. It featured an uneven surface and built-in songbird effects. While small pebbles occasionally tumbled down the belt from a large bin at the front of the machine, the makers thought they were onto a winner, but they had not reckoned on the male testers who kept leaping off to the left and right to relieve themselves in imaginary bushes. The Road Warrior never went into production. Several people drowned during the development of the Aqua treadmill. The emergence of the Elliptical Trainer was thought to mark the beginning of the end of the treadmill. However, most people can use a treadmill with some dignity, whereas everyone who uses an elliptical trainer looks like they're being slowly chased around a bouncy castle by a furious clown. This year, we will see the launch of the Irritator, a treadmill with digital recordings of a male or female voice mimicking an annoying running buddy. Sample sentences. I saw a deer in the park last night. Majestic, if you think about it. Invitation to consider the majesty of something you have not seen is deliberate. Alex is doing so well in school. His teacher says he's a progeny. Misuse of word is designed to infuriate. I always say, the run is not you, you are the run. What? We can slow down if you want, to be used very sparingly. What the heck did I just read? So I'm almost wondering if this article I just read was just a bunch of baloney. Like, was this a bunch of malarkey? Just because there was so many. I mean, don't get me wrong. It was freaking hilarious. Like, I'm beside myself. I'm trying my best not to spit up on myself right now from laughing at this. There's so much just silliness in this. Was this real? Was this a real thing? Dadgummit. Did they bamboozle me? I don't know. I mean, some of it seemed pretty real. Some of these pictures I feel like I've seen before. Like the thing the Romans invented, apparently, that has like the little pedals on it, and you're walking up it. It's kind of like a windmill. Reminds me of a windmill. Or what's the one that is like it's like a windmill, but it's in the water? Do you know what I'm talking about? What do they call that? Is it like a water mill? I don't know, but it looks like that, and so I'm pretty sure I've seen that before. I don't know. Some of this stuff seems kind of cool, but I guess the article just got sillier as it went on. So, I mean, I don't know. Maybe it was telling the truth. I honestly don't know. Don't care. Either way, for what it's worth, super uber duper hilarious. What do you think about that? What do you think about the history of the treadmill? Something I think is funny, though. One thing I do believe is that they did use it for prisoners. And then I feel like the treadmill was created based off of like torture devices they were using to torture people back in the day. And so what's funny and ironic also is that when people have to get on a treadmill, when they're training in a gym, their trainers like making them run the treadmill, or your wife or husband is nagging you to get on there. It's usually it's kind of like, oh, like rolling your eyes. Something about running in place and you're not going anywhere. I feel like that's like a metaphor for life. And why would you want to do that? Why would you want to keep running in place and not going anywhere? So it's torture, right? So if the treadmill was developed and designed in the beginning to be a torture device, I would say that is not too far off from the way people feel about it nowadays. I don't personally own a treadmill, and when I go to the gym, I don't usually use it, although I have been on it before. It's good for what it's worth. It's good. It's better than nothing. It's good exercise. Although I feel like if I was going to run, I would prefer to run, outside, take in the scenery, get some fresh air, see the trees, see nature, see life, see people, dodge cars, stuff like that. What about you? What do you think about that? I rambled on and on and on, but that's what I do. Because I'm a weird guy to go along with my weird news tales. So hopefully you enjoyed that. When we come back, our last segment is going to be about the 10 weirdest computers ever. 10 weirdest computers ever. The 10 weirdest computers ever. Also, I'm going to add in something pretty cute and cool, my own personal little touch in the next segment after I delve into the 10 weirdest computers that you can hear about and read about. We're covering some weird technology, weird machinery on this episode of the GSMC Weird News Podcast. What have you thought of it so far? Which story up to this point has intrigued you the most? Maybe you'll have to wait till the next segment to really answer that question, but it gives you something to think about. We've got Xenobots and robotic corpse eaters and crazy histories for the treadmill. I know the treadmill is kind of like the odd man out, right? Just mixed in there, but hey, I like it. That's what's weird, right? It's the weird news. We got to represent, be extra weird. Come back. We're going to talk about the 10 weirdest computers. Be here or be square. That doesn't rhyme, but I don't care. Come back and check me out. GSMC Weird News Podcast.
The GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast takes you on a journey of exploration. We'll discuss tried and true methods alongside the latest trends of how to best live your life to its fullest and happiest. From psychology to meditation, science to self-help books, the GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast will help you to discover what makes you happy and how you can live life being the best you possible. Download the GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Hi, and welcome back. Welcome back to the GSMC Weird News Podcast, people. I'm your host, Mitchell. Mitchell the man, Mitchell the guy, Mitchell the crazy one. Give you some weird news. Today, we are talking about weird and crazy things in robotics and technology. I guess it would be weird technology, right? Yeah. Weird technology. We got robots, we got microorganisms, we got treadmills, and now we got computers, more specifically. This segment we're going to talk about, well, I will recap you. The last segment, we were talking about the weird and wild history of treadmills, right? Like the crazy things that came out of, treadmills and stuff like that, like how they were invented. And honestly, a big part of them being invented was based on punishment and torture. So I think it's a funny metaphor for how people really don't like treadmills, right? Maybe it's ingrained into our evolution. Our ancestors were tortured on these devices, and there's just something in our subconscious that speaks, don't get on that treadmill. It's bad. Bad. Yeah, well, anyway. This next segment, we're going to talk about the 10 weirdest computers. And then after this, I'm going to share a cute little personal note about something that kind of correlates to this episode and is a little personal touch of mine. Not a personal touch of mine, but just something I like. You'll see. So going right into this comes from The New Scientist. You can find this at www.newscientist.com. And it's the 10 weirdest computers. Today's computers use pulses of electricity flipping magnets to manipulate and store data. But information can be processed in many, many other weirder ways. Number 1, optical computing. There's nothing weird about encoding data in light. Global communications depend on optical fiber. But using light signals to actually process data and carry out computations is still not practical. Optical computers are a worthwhile goal because using light could increase a computer's speed and the quality and quantity of data it can handle. But trapping, storing, and manipulating light is difficult. Research by people like Paul Braun at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, U.S. is bringing us closer to his goal. He has created 3D optical waveguides out of photonic crystals that should make possible to trap light, slow it down, and bend it around sharp corners without fear of it escaping. What on the earth does that even mean? Meanwhile, Michaela Lukin at Harvard University has developed what is essentially an optical version of the transistor that underlies all today's computing power. Lukin and colleagues have created a way to make a single photon from one light signal switch another light signal on and off. Wait, let me read that again because that didn't make sense. Lukin and colleagues have created a way to make a single photon from one light signal switch another light signal on and off. Huh. I'm just going to pretend like I knew what that meant and move on. Number 2, quantum computing. Basically, for the last one, though, just for the educational purpose of it, this is a way to compute data using light signaling from one piece of machinery to the next. They're using light, they're trapping light and manipulating it to send signals. That's the basis of what I can gather from it. I mean, go to New Scientist and maybe you're probably smarter than I am. You can make better discernment out of it. Number 2, quantum computing. If you want to tear up all the rules of classical computing, look no further than quantum computers. Instead of using electronic bits of information that exist in either 1 or 0 states, they use quantum mechanical effects to create qubits that can be in both states at once. Calculations show that this ability allows many parallel computations to be carried out. As the number of qubits a quantum computer increases, the data it can process increases exponentially. That would make possible things that are unfeasible with today's computers, such as rapidly factoring extremely large numbers to crack cryptographic keys. However, quantum computers so far have only had very small numbers of qubits using quantum dots, nuclear magnetic resonance, metal ions, and more recently, entangled pairs of photons. Maybe I should have picked an article that's a little bit more, I don't know, catering to my caveman brain. Quantum computing. I'm not even going to try to explain that one. Hopefully what I just read translates to some form of information. Number 3, DNA computing. DNA may be the perfect material for carrying out computations. In a sense, that is precisely what it evolved to do. DNA processes data and runs programs stored in sequences of genomic base pairs, as well as coordinating proteins that process information themselves to keep organisms alive. The first person to co-opt these processes from computational problems was Leonard Adleman at the University of Southern California. In 1994, he used DNA to solve a well-known mathematical problem called the 7-point Hamiltonian path problem. Since then, DNA has also been used to create logic gates and unbeatable tic-tac-toe opponent. The basic principle is to use sequences of DNA to recognize shorter input strands and to produce different output sequences. The results can then be read, for example, through the activation of fluorescent proteins. Recently, DNA computing enthusiasts have become interested in having their creations go to work inside biological systems like the human body. It makes sense because that's where they fit in best and where conventional computers fit in least. Well, if they're using DNA computing, I feel like earlier, the first segment, Xenobots, that's kind of like DNA computing, right? Because they use the DNA strands, the DNA material of a frog to mix together with these micro machines. And it's like this weird cross-pollination of, artificial mechanics and biological mechanics, right? Number 4, reversible computing. Some people think we should be recycling our bits as well as our trash. Hardware companies have long tried to reduce the power of consumption of computers. One unusual way to do this is by engineering chips that are reversible. Normally, every computational operation that involves losing a bit of information also discards the energy used to present it. Reversible computing aims to recover and reuse this energy. One way to do this, which is being developed by Michael Frank at the University of Florida, U.S., involves making versions of logic gates that can run in reverse. Every computing operation involves feeding inputs into logic gates, which produce output signals, instead of discarding the energy of those signals. Frank's gates run in reverse after every operation. That returns the energy of the output signal to the start of the circuit, where it is used to carry a new input signal. It may sound odd, but according to Frank, as computing power improves, it won't be long before chips' wastefulness will be a major limit to their performance. Billiard ball computing. This is interesting. Computing today involves chain reactions of electrons passing from molecule to molecule inside of a circuit. So it makes sense to try and harness other kinds of chain reaction for computing, even dominoes or marbles. Logic gates have been made by carefully arranging dominoes or chutes for marbles to roll down. Basic computing circuits like half adders can also be made, but making something as powerful as a microprocessor this way will require acres of space, unless your balls or dominoes are very small. Researchers at IBM have experimented with logic circuits that use cascades of atoms bouncing off of each other like billiard balls to pass information along their length. Such gates can only be used once, but could be significantly smaller than even the tiniest existing transistors. That is interesting and also completely mind-numbing. Neuronal computing. Why start from scratch when you can borrow already successful ideas? Some researchers hope to get ahead by copying nature's very own computers. Fernando Musa Invalidi of Northwestern University in Chicago has shown how a few brain cells from a lamprey, a primitive eel-like vertebrae can be used to control a robot. Huh, now that's fascinating. Output from light sensors on the robot was passed to the neurons, and the response is used to control the robot's movement. The brain cells normally used by the Lamprey to orientate itself proved capable of making the robot follow a light source. It's not the first time a critter's brain has been so co-opted in this way. Claire Rind, a neurobiologist at the University of Newcastle, UK, used recordings of the neuronal activity of locusts watching maneuvering TIE fighter spacecraft from the movie Star Wars to develop extremely accurate obstacle avoidance systems. U.S. Defense Research Agency DARPA has recently created a remote-controlled cyborg moth using electrodes in their brain. Whoa, that's nuts. DARPA developed remote-controlled cyborg moths using electrodes in their brains. What the crap? If you go to this site that I'm on, it says you can see the video of the cyborg moths. In fact, you know what? I'm going to click on this right now because I end up forgetting. So I just want to look at it. I'm going to see what's going on here. Well, let me turn the sound off. How do I turn the sound off? There we go. Sound off. Okay, so they have this. Okay, so they've got these really big moths, right? And they're hooking these like electrodes up to them. And they're turning on this frequency. It says, watch how the insect's wings can be controlled with electrical pulses and see a robot steered by a moth. Okay, so they're hooking these electrodes up to these moths, and the moths are controlling these robots with their own movements, and that is so crazy. Huh. This is wild. I really implore anyone to go take a look at this. In fact, if I can get back on Twitter and if I can remember, I will write this down and post this video on the Twitter or something. We'll link it up. Moths brain control. I'm going to put this on Twitter. I remember, hopefully. So you guys can see it because it is insane to see. It's absolutely insane. All right, moving on. Number 7, magnetic Nmr Computing. Every glass of water contains a computer if you just know how to operate it. Susan Stefani, colleagues at the University of York, UK, use strong magnetic fields to control and observe the way in which molecules interact. The method can represent information in 3D and can also exploit the natural dynamics of how molecules interact. If successful, it may prove possible to model something as complex as our atmosphere just using a thimble of water. So far, however, the group have only carried out a proof of principle by somewhat ironically simulating the water-based computer as a classical computer. Number 8. Glooper computer. One of the weirdest computers ever built forsakes traditional hardware in favor of gloopware. Andrew Adamatsky at the University of the West of England can make interfering waves of propagating ions in a chemical goo behave like logic gates, the building blocks of computers. The waves are produced by a pulsing cyclic reaction called the Belousov. Okay, this is a long word. Belousov-Zatsky reaction. Adamatsky has shown that his chemical logic gates can be used to make a robotic hamster, the mixture in which they exist. As the robot's fingers stimulate the chemicals, further reactions are triggered that control the hand. The result is a sort of robotic existential paradox. Did the chemical brain make the robot's hand move, or the hand tell the brain what to think? Eventually, Adamatsky aims to couple these chemical computers to an electroactive gel-based skin to create a complete blob-bot. I'm getting in a Twilight Zone here again, ladies and gents. Moldy computers. Even a primitive organism like slime, mold could be used to solve problems that are tricky for classical computers. Toshitsuki Nagasaki at the Institute of Physical and Chemical Research in Nagoya, Japan, has shown the slime mold could work out the shortest route through a maze. In his experiments, the masses of independent amoeba-like cells that act as a single organism would initially spread out to explore all the possible paths of a maze. But when one train of cells found the shortest path to some food hidden at the maze's exit, the rest of the mass stopped exploring. The slime mold then withdrew from the dead-end roots and followed the direct path to the food. This is interesting for computer scientists because maze solving is similar to the traveling salesman problem, which asks for the shortest route between a number of points in space. The problem quickly scales in complexity as more points are added, making it a tough problem for classical computers. And number 10, last but not least, water wave computing. Perhaps the most unlikely place to see computing power is the ripples in a tank of water. Using a ripple tank and an overhead camera, Kristinath Fernando and Samsa Sojaka of the University of Sussex used wave patterns to make a type of logic gate called an exclusive OR gate, or OR gate, XOR gate. Perceptrons of type of artificial neural network can mimic some types of logic gates, but not a XOR. Only encoding the behavior of an XOR gate into ripples made it possible for the perception to learn how the gates work. Oh my God, my brain. I know some people are listening. What brain? I don't know. Some brain. Some pretty crazy stuff, right? What do you think of that? I don't even know what to tell you when I think about that because I don't know if I really understand it. My producer is going to be like, why would you pick something you don't understand to do? Okay. Why? She's probably not, but yeah, very interesting stuff. 10 weird computations for trading information through means of computer technology. Very interesting. You should check that out and go through the list. If I got to try to post that thing about the moths using the moths to control the robots. It's very interesting. The special thing I wanted to read was because I was talking about James Cameron earlier in the Terminator thing, but like I was wondering myself about like where he got the inspiration to do Terminator, and I found this thing here that talks about how it was James Cameron, or not how it was, but why James Cameron came up with the concept of Terminator. And it's pretty cool, actually. It's very interesting stuff that I would like to come and tell you. And it's pretty brief. So it says, inspired by director John Carpenter, who made the slasher film Halloween on a low budget, Cameron used the dream as a launching pad to write a slasher-style film. Cameron's agent disliked the early concept of the horror film and requested that he work on something else. So his initial thing to create Terminator was originally based off of John Carpenter's Halloween with Michael Myers, and then the incredible advancement that was happening in technology in the world, and then also what he had studied about the advancements of technology, computers, even AI. And so he combined the concepts with like general, like today's science. Well, not today, but today in his day, which was probably in the 70s, 80s maybe. He combined that with the slasher film to make the inspiration for the Terminator. And if you think about it, it makes a lot of sense, right? The Terminator's just mindless robot that just has a mission. And Michael Myers is this psychotic human guy who has a mission of just killing people. And so, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I never knew that. And anybody else wondering, now you know. That's where James Cameron got his information, was from John Carpenter, the Halloween legend, the horror movie legend. R.I.P. Rest in peace. But hopefully you liked today's episode. It covered a lot of interesting things, I thought. Technology, where is it going? I don't know what the consensus is now, but I remember a while ago I was listening to someone talk about how our technology is doubling every 7 years. And now that was a while ago. That was like over a decade ago. And now it's probably tripling, maybe probably quadrupling every 7 years. I don't know if there's a stat on that, but I should try to find it. But yeah, it's pretty crazy. Does that stuff scare you with the advancement of technology and where it's came from and where it's going? Does technology and the advancement of robotics and even the talks of AI, does that stuff freak you out? Does it make you excited? Do you not care either way? Are you just fascinated by it? Are you into it? How does it make you feel? And how do you think it relates in life? What would we do without our technology, and where would we be at? Would we be good or not as good? Or would things even matter, right? I think it's a really cool question to think about. Hopefully you enjoyed today's episode. Sometimes I ramble on, can't pronounce things. Bear with me, people. Trying to get better every time I do this. So hopefully you enjoyed it enough to stick around for another episode of the GSMC Weird News Podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I really appreciate it, and the GSMC really appreciates it. Today's episode was brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network, and I would like to ask for you to follow our social media stuff. Subscribe to our show. Check us out on Twitter and Instagram. Send us some love. Follow us, comment, and check out our other shows. We've got a lot of cool ones, just about anyone you can think of. I hope you learned something today. I learned a good bit of stuff, some interesting thing. I got some cool notes that I'm going to keep with me. And I hope it was enlightening for you and entertaining, if nothing else. If maybe my crazy wackiness get a smile out of you. That would be cool, right? I hope so. Anyways, take care of yourself, and I will see you, be with you, in theory, next time on the GSMC Weird News Podcast.